As you know, this meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to public internet, so chances are whatever you say will remain there for a very long time. With that, let's start the meeting. I have a few items on the agenda. I just sent a link to the agenda in the chat. It's basically a link to our meeting notes. If you scroll down on the second page, you will see that we have a few items for August 22. The first item is that code freeze is coming at the end of this month. So basically next week is going to be very close to our code freeze. So this week I would like to go over the items that we were tracking for 1.16 and see where we are with respect to what we plan to do. So let me actually send a link to our spreadsheet as well. There's the spreadsheet with a link to our planned items. The first one is implement all extension points of the scheduling framework. I believe that this is all done. Correct me if I'm wrong. Abdullah, do you have any updates on this? I know that you have been closely involved with all these things. As far as I know, everything is done, right?
Yeah, correct. We may need to add new extension points depending on how we implement the some of these predicates and priorities. But the ones that are already in the kit has been merged.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Next item is converting existing predicate and priority functions. This was like a stretch goal, really. We didn't want to definitely add this to 1.16. This is going to happen in 1.17. Next item is a scheduler should spread pods among physical hosts. So we actually tried to do this. Abdullah and Ahmad Dia were all very closely involved with this effort. We got pushback from API, basically. They didn't want to add any kind of semantic to particular labels in a cluster. Basically, they didn't want us to, or the scheduler to, distinguish between a node versus a zone versus a region based on just the labels on these nodes. So what we're going to do instead is that we're gonna add these labels as a configuration to the scheduler config in the next release. I don't know if we will have enough bandwidth to do it in 1.17, but that's our current plan. So this basically, a user can specify the labels that they want pods to be spread by default among those failure domains. So if it is node, for example, it can be, the scheduler by default is going to spread pods among nodes. Or if this label is a physical host, it can spread among physical hosts. We can actually have more than just one label. We can have like a hierarchy of like 3 levels or so of spreading among nodes, physical hosts, zones, etc., whatever the user specifies in the config. Next item, supporting less than and greater than operators in interpod affinity. I don't think that we've seen much progress on at this front. I don't know if Klaus is here today. It looks like Klaus is here. He was the shepherd for that feature. I don't know. Klaus, do you have any update for us? Is there any progress?
Yeah, I think we need how much progress for this one because I think what comments about this one is backward compatibility about the API change. And the last comments that I will append to the issue is that we, based on this request, we can only keep the HTTP request or RESTful API backward compatibility. But if anyone use the, use the coding, use the Python client code or the Go client code, they need to change their code after this pull request. We need to get feedback from the other, for example, from the Plan Go, Python Go, whether they're okay about this part.
I see. But given this, I don't think that it can make it to 116, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is going to be, I just write postponed, but we'll see if we can make much progress in the next cycle. Even pod spreading among failure domains. This is something that Wei has been working on, and as far as I can tell, it's done. Is that correct, Wei?
Yeah, all the code has been merged, and I will submit a document PR soon.
Thank you very much. Sounds great. Let's move on to the next item. I don't know if Klaus has any update for us with respect to improved gang scheduling and queue jobs and queue patch. Klaus, do you have any updates?
Oh, some people give a design document about this part, but as you know, there is some change to the API, such as a pull group we discussed before. I'm reviewing the design doc to make sure we align our design. We already have one scheduling design before.
Okay.
I would suggest to make sure they align with each other.
Yeah. That's important.
So yes, I think maybe we can consider consider this item in next release.
Okay. So yeah, that's fine. I think we can consider it as on track because it's just improve. Resource bin packing was something that Sudesh was working on, and Klaus and Abdullah were both reviewing. Do you guys have updates for us? I don't know if Sudesh is here today with us.
Yes.
Here. So Sudesh,
yeah, I think Abdullah is given is reviewed it already, and he's asking for a second review from Wei. So I think that's the only thing pending from that.
Okay, sounds good. So I think given that we are about 9 days from the code freeze, and since it's almost done, I believe we can merge it, right?
Yeah, it's good.
I think we can. I just need the second opinion, just in case I'm missing something.
Okay, sounds good. So I can possibly take a look as well. But
yeah, I think Klaus spent a lot of time in the initial phase of this feature. So if Klaus has some time, yeah, Klaus maybe can take a second look.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
I think the overall of this pull request, I'm okay overall of this pull request. Maybe some comments about this part. I will give a double check about this part. I think it's better. I think we can get this done in this release.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So hopefully it will get merged before code freeze. And there are 2 items which we didn't track really. Those are all grayed out. There was another item, deprecation of cloud-specific code for volume counting, basically max volume support. This was something that Ravi was kind of involved with, and I guess Hemant was also working on it. I don't know if Ravi.
Hemant was working on this.
Yeah. So what is the status, Ravi? Is it?
It's so previously we used to get from the node, or we have a hard-coded value for the number of volumes that can be attached to a node.
Yes.
And so now we have the CSA informer within the scheduler. So it should be good, but I have to check with Hemant once. I'll confirm and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah, sounds good. I think
it has been merged, at least in 116. It has already been merged.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, the deprecation thing has started basically. So I think we can call it on track. And so one other thing that Ravi, you were involved with was resource quota scope selector to GA. I actually, before the meeting, I checked the status. it's pending on one other PR, which I reviewed in the past and left a comment, but you didn't actually continue working on it. This is a PR that actually I put it in the spreadsheet, 76310. So basically, it's the one that says remove limitation or restriction of critical priorities to system namespace or cube system namespace. So what's your take? Why do you think you can?
So it's pending a review from David. So David told he will review it, but I do not know if he has enough time to review it this release. So it can like move to the next release because it's not like high priority thing.
Okay. Another thing is that why does the graduation of scope for resource code dependent on that PR?
Well, without that, it like we are kind of treating Cube system as a special namespace, meaning we are limiting the critical pods only to that namespace. And at least I can think of two different customers, not only of Red Hat, but I have someone from the community asking for the critical pods to be allowed in other namespaces too, not only limited to Cube system. So that's one of the reasons I have made that as criteria for GA. As of now, it's beta, but I have made one of the criteria for graduation.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Sure, I understand that maybe some users want to create other pods in other scopes under namespaces, and then limit those, limit basically usage of these high priorities by creating coda in other namespaces. So sure, it makes sense that this is dependent.
Yeah, and this was actually initial plan for us when we started out, but we did not like follow up on that. We were thinking that it was working fine, like when it has graduated to beta, but it wasn't technically.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the time we felt like it should be okay if we restrict those priorities to the Cube system, but I agree that it may not work for everybody.
Yeah.
So the next item is graduate Cube schedule component config to v1 beta 1. This one is actually we could do it, but I believe Justin Santa Barbara proposed that all the fields of the config should be optional, so that when you're not specified, we don't go with the, basically we can detect that they are not specified in the config, as opposed to just getting their default Go value. So this is particularly important because some values, such as a bool, can be false by default in Go. And if it is false, then you cannot tell whether a user has explicitly set it to false or the user hasn't specified it. In the case that user hasn't specified it, you want to go with a default value, which is basically specified in your code, not necessarily what Go imposes. This is important. We've run into issues with going with Go default values, so we are not going to promote this component config to beta in 1.16. We are going to wait for the other basically the other PRs to merge and make all these fields optional, or convert, basically making all of these fields to pointers so that we can distinguish between a field that is specified versus one that is not specified, and as a result is nil. So this is postponed. Add support for pod overhead. This is done and merged. So these are all the items in our spreadsheet. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add or give us an update for.
Which spreadsheet are we looking at? I thought I updated an item in the doc from the calendar.
Actually, I just sent not just before at the beginning of the meeting. I sent the link to the spreadsheet in the chat window.
Okay, sorry, I missed it.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah, on the chat, can you maybe I joined a little later. Can you paste it again? I had one item to discuss. We can just discuss that if there is nothing else.
Oh, we have a few items on the agenda, so
okay.
They actually are agenda. Let's for now just talk about the updates for the projects and not discuss technical details. Towards the end of the meeting, if we have the time, we can go for more technical details. So another thing that I wanted to quickly remind you is that KubeCon San Diego in November is coming up. I know that some of you folks wanted to give SIG intro and SIG deep dive. I received a reminder email today. Wei and Abdullah, have you guys already submitted talks for the conference?
Yeah, I have submitted the intro along with Ravi.
Okay.
I did as well, like
okay.
3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. There's going to be also some other sessions that contributors can talk with developers. So I don't know exact details about those. I know that there is not going to be any face-to-face summit this time, or in the summit we're not going to have any face-to-face for SIG, but there is a replacement for it with some details. I can actually look them up, but the more important part was to make sure that we have intro and deep dive sessions for the SIG. Another item, yeah, so we had added this item for basically making internal backup mechanism configurable. So,
yes, so this is actually a not urgent one. I saw that in the agenda, Klaus wants to do a demo, so it quite depends. We want to discuss right now or postpone to next week.
Yeah, we can. Actually, I think just very quickly, I think we can make it configurable because one size does not fit all clusters. So that's why I propose making it configurable with the default that is basically the current value that we use in the scheduler, which is 10-second max. But for some clusters, it may not work. So I think we can make it configurable. All right, so Klaus, you can take it over for the demo.
Yeah, I think Xiaoming can help on the demo progress because he has some video and some environment for about this one. Hi, Mingzhe.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Can you see my screen and hear my voice?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Here is Li Ming. I am a contributor of Volcano and I work with Klaus. And let's get into the main topic. Today I'll use a simple Spark job to show you some Volcano features needed by high performance workload. Here is my cast version, and this is the Spark version I used. Running on Kubernetes is supported natively after Spark version 2.3, and now I use 2.4. Okay, I have a two node cluster with almost 8 CPU cores and 16 gigabytes memory in total. And I have a script to submit Spark jobs. This job will create 5 pods in total with each will request a CPU core and a gigabyte memory. And now I just run it. In cluster mode, submit a Spark job means create a driver pod, and then the driver will talk with Kubernetes API server to create executors. And executor will run individual tasks and send the result back to driver. So a Spark job should have at least a driver and an executor. And if all tasks done, driver will kill all the executors and exit with status complete like this. And everything goes well when cluster have enough resources, but you will never left your cluster to be idle. So you will submit as many jobs as you can to fulfill any resources of your cluster. And unfortunately, something bad will happen when cluster is busy. And I have a job to have, I have a script to have a test. This script will submit 10 Spark jobs into a cluster. And driver pod is now creating and running, and then we'll create executor pod. And now that's all. Cluster is now occupied by driver, but none of them can run to complete without executor. That means this cluster is deadlock now. So I just clean yes, deadlock. Just clean it. In the view of default scheduler, driver and executor are almost the same. It needs some extra work to split part of your cluster to driver and guarantee that some executor has its own space. In Volcano, things are different because we have CRD. We introduce CRD named pod groups into cluster, and it will provide some extra info to schedule. Here I have a script to submit a Spark job with Volcano enabled, and we will add a config to tell scheduler that this job will need two CPU cores and 3 GB memory. During scheduling, this minimal resource will be considered and reserved. And now I just run it. Here is my driver, and my pod group is this, and the main resource is set as we expected. I just clean it up for next case. And I have a script to as default scheduler to submit 10 jobs into cluster with Volcano enabled. And I just run this. Okay, the driver is now created and scheduled. And you see, only 4 drivers are scheduled and remains 2 slots for executor. And the executor is now scheduled and assigned to node, and will run to finish. And then our executor will schedule. More importantly, the schedule has fail share policy. it prefers to keep jobs assigned with the same amount of resource, like this. And that means no job can occupy too many resources if cluster is busy.
Sounds good. So how do you distinguish between jobs? This is like the job -1 or versus job -5, which is these are different Spark jobs.
You know what? The pod have annotation, and we can use it. We can use it to assign this pod to pod group.
Yeah.
And the driver and executor assigned to the same pod group, and we call it job. So and when during scheduling, we can consider them together.
Yeah. So my question was basically from the name of those jobs, can you tell, I mean, have you set the name so that you can tell which pod groups they belong to, or it's not possible to tell that from just the names? When you were looking at above, here, when you're looking at the names, can you tell which groups they belong to?
Yes, this driver will have a pod group with the same as this. So every driver has a pod group.
I see. Yeah, but yeah. No, that's the second part after the, basically the last number, I guess, is the pod group number.
Yes, let us. Every driver has its own pod group.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is interesting. I'm glad that you're making progress on making the gang scheduling a reality. Do you guys? I should maybe ask Klaus. Do you guys plan to build this in the scheduling framework?
Yeah. I think scheduling framework is it's good, as we discussed before. So I also trying to see whether scheduling framework can meet our requirements. You know, we
Like really bad. I don't know if other folks can hear you, but
sorry, can you hear me? Oh,
It sounds a lot of noise.
is it sorry? That's okay.
Yeah, better now.
Okay, so so for the scanner framework, I'm trying to consider scanner for Volcano, also Kubernetes. Yeah, and you know, the scheduling is both Kubernetes and Volcano based on the pod group to do the scheduling. So I'm thinking how to integrate it with scanner framework. Yes, I think this is a major difference.
Yeah, sounds good. So
Yes.
I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, that's basically the plan. So yeah, I guess we can work together and see how we can actually bring some of those changes to the framework. I mean, that's of course one of the options. There might be some other options available as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I guess I don't know if we have any more time right now. We are out of time officially, but if there is any other quick comment, question.
Yeah, I think the main thing I wanted to discuss was the descheduler API for event pod spreading. Me and we had an offline discussion on this, and I think we had some suggestions on that. So I don't know if we have time now or we can take that up later.
I mean, other folks feel free to hang up, but sure, let's bring it up. Let's see what the deal is.
Yeah, so the little background on this is that Mayak wants to make the descheduler works without the dependency on the current event path spread API, because the requirement from Mayak is that some cluster or some customers are not going to use alpha feature, right? So that just suppose we don't have event path spread feature.
Yeah, let me add to that. So I mean, basically, like for example, we are basically depending on GKE and EKS and whatever the versions they provide, right? Which basically are stable features, and they come pretty late, and whenever they are made available by the vendor. So we want to be able to run descheduler with whatever version of Kubernetes is currently running, and that could still continue to provide runtime event pod spreading based on the constraints that are not available in the pod API, because for whatever reason, either they are not running the right version of Kubernetes or other reasons. So I want the descheduler to still be able to do the event pod spreading. And so that is the main reason I was basically suggesting that we have the descheduler support and API that works with or without the pod API topology constraints being available. And if the pod constraints are available, then we would use that. Otherwise, we would use the constraints as provided from the descheduler strategy policy itself. So that was the main idea. So sorry, we go ahead.
How do you know? How do you know that someone wants to have spreading? But from just looking at the policy, are you going to assume that all pods require spreading?
Yeah, so the PR, let me add the PR link in the doc. But yeah, I mean, basically the way it's structured right now is that we let the user specify the strategy as event pod spreading, and then for event pod spreading, they also specify the topology spread constraints on a per namespace basis. I'm open to suggestions there, but yeah, I mean, if they specify that, that means the user wants those topology spreads constraints rather than being read from the pod API itself. If they skip that, that means that the user wants to use whatever is specified in the pod API that got merged already. So we would use that.
I see.
But for which pods are you going to do that in the descheduler?
Right. So I mean, basically, let me paste. It has the exact same semantics as the API that is in the pod. So it would have a name, a label selector, and max Q and a topology key. So the label selector within the namespace would determine what pods are the target for the event pod spreading.
I see.
Yeah. So basically, I think Mayak's API is imposed to the descheduler policy with a sort of aggregated namespace topology constraints. And so that a user wants to use this kind of feature in descheduler, he wants to explicitly specify which namespace and which label sector and the topology key and max Q in the strategy. The descheduler strategy API. That is
one obvious thing is that, one obvious limitation is that such a way of configuring the scheduler limits probably the number of namespaces or types of pods that you want to spread. Am I right? Or you allow unlimited number of namespaces and label selectors to be specified?
Yeah, I think the current way is that you can specify multiple namespaces, and for each namespace, you can specify a list of constraints.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean,
I started that when the pod API was not there, and so that we can basically fulfill the goals of like having the pod always spread evenly at runtime for given set of pods, right? So, but now we have the pod API, so we would want both things, right? So if somebody doesn't specify the per namespace spread constraints, then we'll basically use the pod API spread constraints to do the spreading. But if they specify, then we would use this. That's the idea. And that would allow us to not have to wait for 117 or 118 when the feature is actually available, right?
Yeah.
And it might actually be little less resource intensive if I think about it a little out of the head. Like it doesn't have to go through each and every pod spread constraint if I know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, it has its own benefits as well. So if, for example, some users do not want to change any of their pod spec, but they still want to achieve spreading, they could potentially use this this feature and just run a Gscheduler and achieve spreading. So
right, and that would also not involve rolling update of the pods itself. That's true.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so I don't, since I haven't thought carefully and thoroughly about this, we should probably not make a decision right now. But maybe all of us who've been involved with this effort, at least like Abdullah, Wei, and myself, Klaus, and other folks who have an opinion, we can think a little bit more about this and then make a final decision.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to other suggestions on what the API should look like, but I think the key idea is that we should not tie this to like this should always only work with the Alpha API, or it should only work with the pod API, and that would make. I mean, that was the whole point of the descheduler not being inside, right? So that will help a lot other community users do the runtime spreading.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we started out, we were thinking we would go with the pod API that's going to be available in 1.15, but since it has slipped to 1.16, we are thinking of going this route. But from a maintenance perspective, I think it's kind of too early to say. Like unless we get a feedback saying that okay, this is absolutely needed in the in older releases of Kubernetes, and if there is a strong community feedback saying that yes, this is needed, we can think about it. Is what I'm thinking. Like as of now, it is fine. We can have it as Alpha API, but if we are thinking of having this being supported long term, I think we should come back and think through this problem again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you articulated that well. So I agree. I think we should not rush this and wait a little bit, go with Alpha, and then based on feedback, we can make a decision.
Yeah, this can be confusing, at least from like even while writing the document, it would be difficult for people to understand when they're reading it. So it's like, first of all, let's go with Alpha and then see if we get some good feedback. We can improve on it, or else we can tell that okay, since it's Alpha, we are going to remove it. We would just support the pod API.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. This is the end of our meeting. I know that there are a few other items and people had other questions, but hopefully we'll get to all of them by next week. And please do not forget that we are getting closer to the code freeze. If you have pending PRs, please ping one of us, me, Abdullah, Wei, Ravi, Klaus, for approval and review. Thank you very much. See you folks next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.